Okay, so we're going to take a look at how I created this spreadsheet to simulate our problem from this month's column. So in the problem we had Alice put a coin heads up on the table. Bill came in and flipped two coins. Then Carl went in and removed one of the coins, not seeing what was there. And when Alice came back, she noticed there was two heads, and we wanted to see what the probability that Carl actually removed a head. So I've set this up so we've got a bunch of columns to represent the things that we're doing. So our first column represents Alice. I've labeled these 1, 2, and 3 to represent our 3 coins. So Alice is always going to be heads. So if you look in cell A3, my formula is just equals heads. I could have just put in an H, but I've created a formula for it. And when I copy that down, it's just going to copy heads into everything in that column. But Bill is tossing the coins. So we've got heads and tails. So for him, I've basically just looked at the random number generator, pick a random number. If it's less than 0.5, it's going to be heads, else, or otherwise it's going to be tails. So this guy is basically going to be heads or tails based on a random number. And the same thing with this one here. So it's exactly the same formula. And again, when that copies down, it's going to do that for future rows. Now, Carl goes in and removes one of these coins. So I'm just using the number 1, 2, 3 to represent whether he removes coin 1, 2, or 3. And to do that, again, I'm going to use another random number generator. I'm going to use random between 1 and 3, which just gives me a number between 1 and 3, 1, 2, or 3. So Carl removes 2, which means he's going to remove tails, which means there's going to be heads left. And his coin was a tail. So how did I create the rest of this stuff? So left being heads. Now I really have to create a formula for each of the 3 cases. I probably could create a formula using strings. I'd have to look at whether you could use left string, right string, mid string, and all that in here. But what I've done for this formula is basically set up 3 things. I've got a conditional. So if D1, so if Carl's removal is 1, then what I'm going to do is make a string that's cells 2 and 3 put together. So I'm going to concatenate these 2 strings in B and C, which should be 2 and 3. If that's false, then I have another conditional. If it's 2, then I'm going to concatenate the first and the third. And then if that's false, I'm going to concatenate the first and the second. So this will always be the 2 cells merged together other than the one that we choose. Now the conditions of the problem were that when we do this, Alice goes in and sees heads. Well, if we remove a tail, there are 2 heads left, which means that our condition is true. If we just sort of do this at random, there's going to be some times that Alice would go in and not see heads. Well, we don't want to look at these situations. We're told that she sees heads. So those other situations couldn't happen. So they become part of our sample set, or our sort of our event set. So how can we check to see if this is true? Well, we compare this thing, E3, to HH. So, and I just said equals, E3 equals HH, so that it's going to be a Boolean. If E3 is HH, it's going to be true. Otherwise, it's going to be false. Carl's coin, well, that's just going to be the one at 2. So again, I'm going to have to set up a conditional that if it's 1, I'm going to pick in row A. If it's 2, I'm going to pick in row B. And if it's 3, I'm going to pick in row C. Our total cases, well, each time this is true, I get one more case. So just to make life easy for myself, I put a 0 in this row above so that I can just indicate that what's going to happen here, if this is true, so if F3, which is a Boolean, in other words, if F3 is true, then I'm going to take this number and add 1. Otherwise, I'm going to keep it the same. And the same thing with our events. So now for our events, I'm going to be checking to see if this is heads. So if this thing is true and G3 is heads, then I'm going to add 1 to this. Otherwise, I'm going to keep it as it is. And my probability is just going to be those two things divided. But I've also thrown in sort of an undefined thing here so that you don't get the reference thing if we haven't actually had any cases and you get a 0 divided by 0. So I've just thrown in a thing there that if it happens to be that I get 0 divided by 0, it's going to print undefined. Otherwise, it's going to write it as a percentage. Now, the other thing that's in these is notice that we've got the green and red, so I've put some conditional formatting on it. So if I click on any of these cells and I go to format conditional formatting, you can see that I've actually got two rules going on. I've got custom formula number 1 that says that if F3, so F3 is this conditional one here. Now, a couple of things to notice. It's $F and 3. What that means is that I'm always checking column F in any particular row. So this is going to be a formula that's going to work down, and it's just like when we fill things down, the spreadsheet's going to know to sort of advanced things as we go down. So I'm sort of setting it up for the first row, and I basically told it if this thing is true, I wanted to bold everything and put it sort of a green background. If we click on that, here's the range that I applied, so I sort of zoomed it down. I picked a custom formula equals $F3 so that it's staying at column F, and whatever things in the row are going to be equal to that. And what have I done? Well, I've bolded things and I've selected a color. And then similar for this guy here, I've gone through and I've made it not F3. So in other words, if this thing is false, then I'm just going to change the text color to red. So that's all I did. And then if we look at what happens here, we notice that as we go down and we get a few more cases, we start getting up in the 60% range, sort of a little bit over 50, a little bit less than 60. I've done basically 100 cases here, but because it only counts when she sees two heads, we've only seen actually 39 cases, which is not a huge sample size. Since we've got the spreadsheet, we could easily take this thing and extend it down to get us more and more cases. And we'll see that we start getting something a little bit closer to 60-ish%.